Hello and welcome to a special discussion with the Attorney General, the Honorable Vincent Byron Jr. I'm Jason Davis, and we're going to be discussing the new additional restrictive measures announced by Prime Minister Harris in an address on Friday night. Now, to sum it up, simply put, there have been new restrictive measures on the nation as part of efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19. And to give a brief summary, over the next 2 weeks, there will be alternating periods of 24-hour lockdown and days of limited movement, which would include nightly curfews. The 24-hour lockdown begins on Sunday, June 27 at 6 p.m. and will run until 5 a.m. on Thursday, July 1. Now, on Thursday and Friday, July 2, there will be limited movement of operation where you can go to the pharmacy, go to the supermarket, and get essential business done from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on both days. Now, on Friday, that's July 2nd, at 6 p.m., the nation goes back into a 24-hour lockdown. Well, specifically, St. Kitts goes back into a 24-hour lockdown. And that runs up until Thursday, July 8th. And once again, on Thursday and Friday, the 8th and the 9th, the nation will reopen for essential business and with limited movement from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Once again, full lockdown begins this Sunday at 6 p.m., runs until Thursday. On Thursday and Friday, you can do your shopping during the day. After that Friday, until the next Thursday, it's another 24-hour lockdown, and then again on Thursday and Fridays, shopping days. Pretty straightforward. That's how it's going to be for the next 2 weeks. We are going to be discussing some issues and some questions that people have raised on social media. And as we have done in our previous discussion, this will be an interactive engagement where persons within the sound of my voice viewing us on YouTube or on our Facebook link, you can submit questions in the comments below. I will receive them and pass them on to the AG, but please precede your question with the word question so we can easily identify them and make them a part of the discussion. First of all, welcome back, Mr. AG. Good to have you again.
Thank you very much, Jason. I think it was some 2 weeks ago that I was here trying to explain some of the measures that were being instituted to help us to combat this surge of cases that we have had since the 19th of May, some 5 weeks ago. And those measures were intended to help us get a handle on that and reduce the numbers of cases that we're having. In reviewing this matter over the last few weeks, we have found that although there has been a plateau of cases, we have reached as high as 32. We have not gone higher than 32, but we have had on Wednesday, there were some 27 cases. Again, on Thursday, 29 cases. And so there seemed to be the need for us to extend the measures, to be more strict on the measures, because we have had reports that many of our citizens have been violating the measures. They have been moving around. The measures in particular had been intended to restrict movement. So we have been told, and we believe, that the virus moves with people. When people come into contact with each other, they can spread. If you are not in contact with each other, the virus will die after an incubation period of 14 days. So the measures that we are trying to implement are going to be more strict. They'll be enforced, and we hope that this will give us a handle on this outbreak of the virus.
Okay, great. Both yourself and other government and health officials have spoken ad nauseum about the rationale behind these measures, all in an effort to restrict movement to stop the spread, because that's how the virus spreads. Now, one of the questions that's popped up quite a few times on social media is, why now? Why is the 24-hour lockdown being introduced now? Why wasn't it done for the previous 2 weeks?
Well, we have had a program since last year of being gradually opening up the economy, because people have to live. And while the government strategy has always been lives first, we want to protect lives, that we understand that people have to get back to work, people have to earn a living, and so there has been a balance over time of ensuring that where there are some restrictions, we advocate and insist that people wear masks, that they social distance, that we sanitize, the non-pharmaceutical measures that can help to protect us and must protect us. This has been the gradual approach to have businesses gradually open, especially since after October the 31st, when we reopened the borders. And so we have been getting back to that sense of normalcy. Again, too, it has been very important for us to have had those measures until the vaccination program could be rolled out and the society, the community, can be vaccinated. Because we believe, we have been told by our health experts, this is the World Health Organization and our local health experts, that this is the best way to control the spread of the virus, to live with the virus, that all of us must be vaccinated. And so the vaccination program is going exceptionally well. We believe that we are among the best in the region, and so forth. So there has been, as we get closer to that point where the vaccination process will be able to impact on us, where so many people will not become infected, and we can therefore live properly with it. This has been the approach, to have that balance. So there's been some limited operation of business, businesses can function, and people can get vaccinated once you do those masks. But some of the cases we have found in the spread occurred in businesses. People have been to gaming establishments, to some shops, and in those environments, the virus has spread there. And so initially we began closing some businesses. And there have been that idea that people are still moving too much and coming into contact with each other. So the restrictive measures was a balance between economic activity and trying to have people reduce their movement and contact with each other.
As a sort of follow-up to that, but as you can see here, we are in a situation where we're going to have the 24-hour lockdown. So I know hindsight tends to be 20/20, but wouldn't it have been a bit more effective to begin with the lockdown and then gradually open up? I
think, as you say, it's hindsight, and that's behind us. And we are more concerned at this point to arrest this current surge. Look, it doesn't mean that if we have another surge 2 months from now, we lock down again. Not at all. Because we expect that as we go forward, more and more of our citizens will become vaccinated. And we'll get to that time of herd immunity. Herd immunity is no magical number or time, but that enough of our citizens are vaccinated, that if there is some entry into the community of the virus, it will not spread in a way that can be debilitating, that can stop people from operating. For instance, we have some cases where people are positive, and in a work environment, the work slows down because others have to be quarantined if they become positive. And so that is a process that we understand will happen, but there will come a time when enough of our people are vaccinated and will be able to withstand that type of interaction.
Okay, so while we've been talking, I've been receiving quite a few questions, and I'd like to get to them ASAP so we can get as many questions in as possible. Okay, first of all, now will public transportation be allowed to operate to take persons without transportation to the vaccination sites?
I would think that that is something that is under consideration. The short answer would be yes, but clearly public transportation is not going to take people to public places because they're not functioning. There is only a limited amount of movement we expect on the first 3 days. That's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. People will be allowed to go to vaccination sites. We know the numbers, we know where they're coming from, and so the vast majority of people, this is a very small subset of our community, so it's not that there will be regular buses up and down the place. That is a no-no, that won't be happening, but we expect those who are not vaccinated or those who need a second dose of their vaccination to be allowed to move. But other types of things, you stay at home. This is a shelter in place for people to stay at home.
Has been made
very clear
numerous times.
Yes.
But let me just tack on to that. So, as for those persons who want to go and they need public transportation, have any sort of discussions been held as to how that's going to be facilitated?
Well, it's very difficult to say at this point in time. I know that the task force has looked at it, and the Ministry of Health has looked at that, and so that will be further discussed this afternoon when we have our briefing, our NEAC briefing, when we have the medical personnel as well as the various speakers. I think we would have the police would be there to say what type of restrictions will be in place and what they will allow and what they will not allow.
Okay. Next question. How will the new measures, which will be enforced over the next 2 weeks, how will these new measures impact travelers attempting to leave the island?
That will not impact them at all. These travelers, if you are coming from a community away from the airport, we expect you to inform your local police station, and the police will be the ones who are going to be on the road stopping you. So before, I would say, today by now you must know you're leaving, so you would have booked a passage, and you let your police station know that I have to travel on Wednesday at such and such an hour, and therefore I would want to be able to get access to the airport. So that's very clear. Okay. I think another question that you're going to ask, if I preempt you, is that if I have to take a PCR test, a RT-PCR test, that is now mandatory when you travel to make sure I'm negative. These can be arranged with the local labs. You should have already been able to have identified a lab that does that test, and you should have an appointment. And if you have such an appointment, this can be deemed a medical facility where you can be allowed to go and take that RT-PCR test. Okay.
So the short version is contact the police to be allowed to go to the airport and make your arrangements for the test beforehand.
Beforehand, certainly. You have to do so 3 days beforehand.
All right.
So you can't do it on Wednesday or Tuesday. You should have been doing it on Monday. But by now you should have already have called the lab to set an appointment to have that test done.
Okay. I think you touched on this already. Someone asked, will the airport remain open? The answer is, of course.
The answer is yes. Just to be clear, everyone is aware that we are in a state of emergency. And the reason why we went to the state of emergency, it gives us a legal underpinning to be able to close our borders and to institute curfews so that the police can have the legal authority to arrest those who violate the curfew and also to stop movement. We have found that we have not closed the borders at this point in time, and we think that that is not necessary. Just to say that to date, since October the 1st last year, there has been quite a lot of work done to develop what we call a corridor of containment, so that when someone lands at the airport, you are met with port health officials, customs, immigration. All have been trained in how to deal in this COVID situation. To leave the airport, you leave in a COVID-certified taxi operator that goes to a COVID-certified quarantine site or hotel. And so these will still operate in this, it's a limited operation, but even on the total lockdown days, there must be some opening for the corridor of containment to function. I should point out as well, it's important to point out that there will be those travelers who will go to Nevis. And so there are COVID-certified ferry operators that will also function as well.
Speaking of travel to and from Nevis, a follow-up question I think posted by the same person. If the airports are remaining open, would persons from Nevis be able to travel to St. Kitts for already booked flights?
That's correct.
Yeah,
so that is already taken care of.
Okay. Next question. I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to pose it anyway since I'm asking all of the questions. During the 24-hour lockdown days, will banks be opened?
No.
Okay. Will the SR&O accommodate for essential workers? For example, essential workers are working now while others can shop. Will there be a specific time set for essential workers similar to the last 24-hour lockdown last year?
Well, it depends on what you mean by essential workers and how that is. And I think within your work with your supervisors that some arrangements would be made. As to the exact dynamics of that, I'm not in a position to speak of this today, at this point, but I would tend to think that that is a question that can maybe be better answered at the New York briefing this afternoon, when we would hear how the police would arrange for something like that to happen.
Mm-hmm. I remember last year at the supermarkets there were specific lines for essential workers. Do you know if that will be in place again this year?
I can't speak to that at this point in time.
Okay. My own follow-up question, again, last year there was a zoning system for persons who can come and shop in Bastille. Will that be in place?
No, the advice from the police was that was not as efficient as we'd like to see, or effective, and so they advocated that we should not do that.
All right, so no zoning this year. How can travelers get to the airport? You've already covered that.
Yes.
Speak to the police beforehand and make arrangements. Okay. What are the plans after the 2 weeks have passed?
Well, that is something that the cabinet will deliberate. There is quite a lot of discussion, especially in relation to what do we do about those who are vaccinated and those who are unvaccinated. Would there be, as it was, certain restrictions to those who have not yet vaccinated? That is something that the cabinet will make a decision on and publish before the end of the 2-week situation. We expect that we get advice from our medical experts. They will see the numbers as to what has happened. We expect it that this break in movement to be effective for us to get control of our community spread, and that we just have to tighten up. I want to say very clearly that the whole question of the spread of COVID or a fight against COVID depends on each and every citizen. We have preached, we have lamented, we have appealed. Each of us have to be careful about our behavior. And when I speak about behavior, how we live, we must insist that those around us, that we ourselves and those around us wear a mask. We must insist that we don't go in crowds, that there is social distance. We must insist on sanitizing. So that is the way how we will be able to live going forward without having these inconvenient periods of tighter restrictions. It is important, therefore, that we must get vaccinated, which is our ultimate tool, but we must also adhere to the protocols that have been put in place. That is the way how we live after this period, 2-week period, and we live going forward. If you have a grandmother, you have to carry food for her, you sanitize, not because you're grandmother. She is vulnerable, and so you must help to protect her, how you behave around her. So within the family setting, you must do these things as well. We had felt that once you're in the family, it's okay, we can relax. But Dr. Laws has reported that we have noted that the new cases, a number of the new cases that are coming forward are in family settings, people with the same names. So one person is outside the family, goes home, and next thing the entire family comes down with the virus. So there's a need for us to be very careful how we interact in all situations, even in the household, even in the family.
All right. Definitely unrelated question to the family ties. Can Ross students expect to go back to campus?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure what that means. At this point in time, there's a shelter-in-place order, and we expect the Ross students to conform to the same regulations all our citizens. You note last night, the Honorable Prime Minister spoke about education in this way, and that is while religious institutions, educational institutions are closed, and I suspect you are speaking about state institutions, the local education system. There is a special carve-out for students who are taking exams. CXA exams began some 2 weeks ago, and they will go for a few more weeks. Next 2 weeks, you're having the first written exams. And so there is a special dispensation for students to be able to sit the exams. We understand that we cannot in any way restrict them from being able to take the exams. So students can travel to the exam center, a parent or guardian can drop them. In some cases, a school bus will be available to take the students to that exam center. So that it becomes for the education system, our local education. But the Rationale students, that is a question where they, I'm certain, can do most of their work online, but I can't speak to that more than that.
All right. We have a few questions all asking about the airport, and I think many of them you may have answered. I'm just going to read them for acknowledgement's sake. I don't know if you can answer this one. When will British Airways be coming back to St. Kitts?
Well, I can't answer that one shortly, and really that had been a question that had come to Cabinet. You know, there had been a travel advisory to travel from England, but we have been in active discussion with the airline about them resuming their travel. At this point in time, I can't answer. Hopefully after the 2-week period we're talking, that we will be able to have them come back shortly if things are much better than how they are today.
Okay. I know you answered this question before, but I'll read it. Will the borders be open for commercial air travel over the next 2 weeks? The answer
is yes.
Okay. If I have a confirmed flight to travel on Wednesday, what happens in that case? Or
I've explained that already. You should inform the police that you will travel to the airport, so they will know that if you are stopped on the road, that you have a legitimate reason, a legal reason to be going to the airport. You should get your RT-PCR test done, I suspect on Monday or Tuesday, however long it takes, but contact the lab to be able to get an appointment when you can come, when they'll be available for you to do so.
Okay.
So these are things that are already in place.
So even on a full lockdown day, you can go to the police, explain your situation, and you'll be able to travel to the airport to leave.
That's
Will you need a pass or something? Or?
Well, that is something the police would work out with you.
Okay. Next question. What evidence is there that lockdowns will encourage those that have chosen to remain unvaccinated to change their minds and take the vaccine?
I can't answer that. We just have to appeal to our citizens, all of you, to be able to do what we believe is right, that you take the vaccine to protect yourself and your family and the community. We understand that some of you may have reservations based on questions of religious conscience. Some may not be able to take the vaccine for medical and other reasons. Clearly, there are a large, significant number of our citizens, those below the age of 18, that are not taking the vaccine, but we would hope that everybody takes that vaccine for the good of the community.
Okay. Now, I know the Prime Minister mentioned farmers and fisher folk, and this ties in sort of to this question. What's in place for livestock farmers, especially those with goats?
Yes, I think that we are very clear in our regulations that will be promulgated today, that there is a special dispensation for farmers, those who have herd farming, farmers and the fishermen, to be able to fish. It says specifically in the regulations on days of limited operation. But as we did last year, farmers who had herds, who had animals, were able to get special allowance to the police. So that is allowed to. We expect them to take care of their animals.
Okay. So the short version is farmers should go to the police, get their allowance, and then they'd be able to work, as it were, on the 24-hour lockdown days.
Well, for a limited time.
Right.
Normally, I think last year we gave them 2 hours or something of that nature.
All right, okay. But it all begins with going to the police.
That's right.
Okay. Next question. I have a friend whose mother doesn't live with her, but she cooks for her mother, and she would like to know how would she get her mother's food to her during the 24-hour lockdown. Her mother lives within walking distance.
Again, like I said, if you're in a community, you should have some relationship with your local police thing and just inform them. I don't see that as being an issue. Your mother has to be able to live, but we don't need everybody to have a mother within walking distance, because that means everybody be walking up and down. So there is a certain discretion that must be dealt with. We want to save lives, and that means that people have to eat. And so we expect that there would be a certain amount of discretion from the community police to be able to allow something of that nature. It's not to be abused.
Okay. In a similar vein, will persons carrying food items for family members in quarantine be able to apply for passes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, these questions are about the health centers. It was mentioned earlier that the health centers will be open for vaccination up until the end of the month. And the Prime Minister mentioned that you have to go and carry your vaccine card on your way to get vaccinated for your second dose. What's the process for persons who don't have a card and are going for the first dose?
I would tend to think the same issue, that you should make every effort to inform the authorities that you're going to do that. It's only between 8 and 1 in the day, for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday next week. Health centers will open on Thursday and Friday. Days of limited operation. At this point in time, I don't know if any other arrangements have been made. But I would expect that there needs to be proper communication, and so you won't be stopped, or if you're stopped, you would have had some form of official authorization to do so.
Okay. You said the health centers will be open on Thursday and Friday. What about the 24-hour lockdown days?
The 24-hour lockdown, the health centers will be closed,
okay,
except for the vaccination process. If you have a medical emergency, you go to the hospital. Let me speak to questions of, in some of our communities, there are some people who have diabetic conditions, who have public health nurses, will know of their clients, their patients, and will interact with them to ensure that they're properly taken care of.
Again, really,
that will be an essential service, an essential work. So you don't need to really understand that otherwise than that.
Okay. Again, related to the health centers, you said that the health centers will be open on 24-hour lockdown days only for vaccination purposes?
Only for vaccination purposes.
So filling of prescriptions and...
No.
So, okay, those must be done on the days of limited movement?
Limited movement. If there's an emergency, you go to the hospital.
Okay, so again, just to sum up for anyone who's interested, during the lockdown days, you can only go to the health center for vaccinations. Any other business must be done on the days of limited operation, or shopping days, as they were sometimes called, which would be the Thursday and Fridays coming up in the next 2 weeks. Yeah. All right.
I just want to speak a little bit about that shopping days. Mm-hmm. It's not a shopping day. It's that if you need to shop, you go to the shop. So it's not a chance to come out to Lime. Because shopping for a lot of people is a social activity. You go to the supermarket, you Lime, and you talk with people. That's not the intention of the limited operation. If it is that you can stay in your yard for 2 weeks, you do so. And you eke out a certain thing. Because these are specific measures to stop the movement of people, to reduce the movement of people. It's not a question for people to have a social Lime at a shopping center on a Thursday and Friday, or today, or tomorrow. If you don't have to go, you don't go. So it's not a question that we have to go out there to be happy and talking with the people. We want to reduce the restriction, and so stay in your yard. If you have to, you can do that. Except if it's an emergency, you come out of your yard. If it's not an emergency, stay in your yard. If you have to get something desperately from the shop, you have to. But stay in your yard. The idea is that people need to restrict their movement. It's not a period for social activity. No beach, no Lime in. Those things we are asking you for 2 weeks to bring under control.
Okay, let us continue. Let's scroll down these questions. So many of them. We asked that one already. We asked that. As an essential worker, what provision will be in place for persons dropping an essential worker to and from work?
If you're an essential worker, you would have already made arrangements with your business, with your utility or whatever it is, and that should have already been in place. And I would tend to think that you should have a pass, some sort of credential that should have been arranged with the police.
Okay. Why is Nevis still under a 6 p.m. curfew? Is there a reason for that?
Yes, we still want to control the spread in Nevis. Let me pause, because I think it's important to understand the nature of the COVID pandemic is such that is ravaging the whole world. And many of our sister islands, countries in the Caribbean, have faced what we are now facing. We have been very fortunate here in St. Kitts, very blessed in St. Kitts and Nevis to have avoided this surge, this wave of infectious cases. But most of our region has done so ahead of us. There are some 10 countries as I speak that have states of emergency and have curfews to be able to deal with that. That's why they have the states of emergency. Some 10. So that the question of a curfew is done that people do not move at evening, they don't socialize, they don't get in bars and parties and night spots. So the idea is to restrict that type of interaction at this time until we get to that point of enough of us being vaccinated, where we know when we go out, we know how to wear our masks and interact. That we hope we can get to sooner rather than later. But at this point in time, St. Kitts, Nevis, other territories in the region, we all have that same problem. We need to restrict movements, especially in the evenings, so that we can contain the virus at this point in time.
Okay. In terms of the airport and airline workers, would they need to apply for a mobile pass, or would the SCASPA ID suffice for the police to allow movement for these workers?
I think that should have already been in place. These workers were there last year, and we have had a curfew for the last few weeks. And so they should have already have in their possession, made arrangements to their authority or with the police for that to have happened. And I'm sure that they do have that.
Okay. So I'm assuming that this came from a SCASPA employee. So if
I hope not. I hope not. I think that would be from a general public who has general concern. But if it is from a SCASPA employee, you should be able to speak to your supervisor, and the police would be able to provide that.
All righty then.
Passes are provided in cases of essential workers through the police. And there's more than one way to do so. There is a police hotline, a police online that you can make that application. I think normally to get such a pass, you'd have to have a picture ID. You'll have to have fill out a short form, and that can provide for you the necessary pass, so that you won't be unnecessarily stopped on your way to work or in pursuit of your duty or your job that you may be doing.
Okay. Next question. Will inland revenue be open for payment or collection of vehicles and decals for persons who paid online?
Not on the lockdown days, clearly not. I would tend to think that the Revenue Department would put out a notice. But I believe on Thursday and Friday, I can't speak to it, but I believe there have been in limited operation over the last couple of weeks functioning. And so on Thursday and Friday, if that is necessary, it is quite likely that would happen. But I would not be able to say definitively at this point in time. Definitely not Monday, not Tuesday, nor Wednesday.
Now,
the 24-hour days, they will not be open.
Of course. I know you mentioned earlier regarding students traveling to school to do exams that there will be a special dispensation law for that. This question says, would the person taking their child, would they need permission from the police in order to take them?
A good question. Again, too, we'll hear more from Superintendent Henry later today on what arrangements will be put in place for them. But it is important that we do have allowance for students to get to the exam centers. And so what we have to do, we'll do accordingly.
Okay. I think you touched on this, but someone's asking specifically, would persons who are undergoing chemo at the hospital have access to go during the lockdown days?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the medical, we can consider the medical emergency. And if you're doing chemo, dialysis, I think those are things that must go on.
Okay. Is there anything in place for pensioners to get their pension who don't have a bank account and who would have to go to the post office to get their check?
Again, that's a very good question, and I would tend to think that something has to be put in place for that. I don't have an answer for you today, but I think that would be something that would definitely have to be done.
Okay. This is a question I had earlier about the COVID tests themselves. Now, can you just explain for persons who might have to get their tests once more, when they can and cannot, and how would they be able to get their tests during this upcoming 2 weeks?
Again, I think that you need to get a lab, an address. If you're traveling, you need to get the address of a lab. There are a number of labs that are available to the COVID test, and you should make a phone call to the lab to arrange an appointment to get that lab. They'll tell you what days are available, what hour to come, and you then have to do that. I said, but it's, to my mind, you should make a direct contact to the lab that does these tests, and they're going to be functioning. Okay, they're not going to be closed to you if you have a need to travel.
Are there any plans to put a restriction on the number of persons from a household who can go to a supermarket? Sometimes you may see 2 or 3 people from a family going to collect groceries at once.
The restriction should come from the family. I don't think that is something that we have asked last year, and we asked that the family sit down, they make a list, what do I need, what is urgent, what is necessary, and one person should be able to go. For everybody to go as a social event, it defeats the whole purpose of what we're trying to do. And to buy everything in the world at this time, apart from the fact that it bothers, it's maybe not good financial management, but you must be conscious of the need to go and come back home. You go pick up what you need to do and go back home. It's not a social lineman function. Many of us, when we go shopping on the weekends, it is for us to meet friends, for us to browse. I think over the next 2 weeks, this year is a special case, and we're asking you to understand that, to restrict that movement only where necessary.
Next question, would MoneyGram or Western Union be open on the days of limited operation?
We know that financial institutions, I know of banks, I know of the credit unions, those have been given special dispensation. I cannot speak directly if those, the MoneyGram and those have been open. I think they have been, but again, that is something that the police would normally, and the Commissioner of Police would determine. But I think there would be. I can't speak definitively to that. But that's a question we can clarify from police when we get next to hear from them.
Okay. This is a follow-up. Earlier we spoke about the SCASPA employees, and you said something should be in place for them to be able to go to work. We have a comment following up on your statement saying, apparently from a SCASPA employee, saying, we don't have such, I work at SCASPA, I don't have such pass that the AG is saying that we're supposed to have.
Well, it depends on what work the person does at CASPA. Is he an essential worker? Is that person, for instance, one that can not necessarily need to work at this particular time? What the Prime Minister would have said last night, and what we have said in regulations previously, is that essential work would mean that in many cases, a department head can reduce those who need to go in to work. You may not need the full complement of staff. You should not need the full complement of staff. And what we are trying to do is have skeleton staffs function where we must work. So there will be some people who do not need to go to work, and where you do need to work, your supervisor, if you are in public service, should inform the PS. Ultimately, Cabinet Secretary will give that authorization. That is what the regulation states. If you are from a public authority, such as CASPER, that permission will be granted by the Commissioner of Police, a statutory body. So these are things where you must work. Your supervisor, the chairman or the CEO of the authority would arrange for the police to know who should work, and you should therefore get a pass. If the authority, the statutory body, deems it necessary for you to work. And that should be arranged internally and the arrangement put in place. But it should not be a loose arrangement where we turn up, where we do not need to turn up. We are trying to restrict movements, not for people to find ways to come out of the house and be on the street. It's for 2 weeks, and we're asking all of us to cooperate with this approach to try to get a handle on this current surge that we're having in our country.
This was a question that was posed to me in person, and I figured you're very knowledgeable about the legal ins and outs. Persons who are paying child support but do not work in essential businesses, they have been low on funds, as it were, for the past few weeks. Would the courts take that into consideration when it comes time for them to pay?
That is a very important question. I can't speak to what a magistrate would do. It would be improper for me to say what a judicial officer in a tribunal will do. I would tend to think that there would be a discretion that they can have, and that I could see that an attorney or an individual would put a case to a court and ask for some sort of leniency. That is something that is normally arranged between the court and the individual. There are some people, for instance, who have a court order to pay child support, and they are given time. But remember, it's not just the individuals working, it's also the child as well. So there is a balance here that a judicial officer has to take into account. And so what I can say, that if it is that there are children who need to be supported, there are questions of social services that can be contacted to assist, to fill those gaps. Food vouchers are available, and so there's that. As to the obligation of a father or other to pay maintenance, child support, that is something that they would have to make a case to the magistrate once the courts open up.
Okay. What police station or police stations can you get the passes from?
Well, you'll have to call them. Clearly, the passes, I'm sorry, that can be had online. You can make your application online to the police. They've made it very seamless and very easy. So if you went online to the police webpage, they will show you what you have to put in, what you have to put in place, and you can then make that application there. What you have to upload, or if you don't have that, you can go to any police station and ask, and they should be able to give you some sort of information as to who to call at the Bassett police station, where normally these passes will be issued. Ultimately, the passes are under the purview of the Commissioner of Police, but he would have his staff who are set up to assist him in doing so.
Will there be any stimulus packages put in place for private workers who are not working right now?
It is a consideration that the government, the cabinet has to do. It has been broached to us, and I think that the Prime Minister has given instruction to the Ministry of Finance to see if there can be certain recommendations to do so. But we are very cognizant of the fact that this is a difficult time, and we'll do what we can to support our citizens in this time of need, if there is such a need.
Okay. You may have touched on this one already, but I'm going to ask it anyway. It's a follow-up to a previous question. I'm a nurse, and my significant other is my source of transportation. I'm concerned of him being arrested when he would be dropping me off to work. So how would she make sure that doesn't happen?
Well, again, the normal thing, the police are enforcing these regulations. And there must be some way for you to be able to communicate either through your supervisor at your hospital or wherever you're working, or directly to the police to let them know that that is it. Because really, as we say, we want to restrict movement. That's fundamentally the issue. And if you need to get special permission, you should try and do so ahead of time. Not on the road and try to argue with the police officers, but make a phone call or go online and do so.
Okay. Next question. I just got a ticket today. Will court be open for me to pay, or do I pay this after the 2-week lockdown?
Well, you'll have to pay it after the 2-week lockdown, because that is not there. The court is not open at this point in time.
Okay. And hopefully they'll take that into consideration.
Hopefully they'll take that into consideration.
All righty then. We are still taking questions. Once again, if you are watching the live stream on YouTube or on Facebook, you can submit your questions in the comment section below, but please preface your question with the word question so we can easily identify it. Next question. I think you have already you've spoken about it. What's the position with students who are supposed to have exams?
Yes. And we have mentioned that you have a dispensation, a special pass to do so. As to how it works in practice, we'll hear later today from the police as they explain that. I want to, Jason, if I may, just reinforce again where we are in St. Kitts and Nevis today. At this point in time, there is a state of emergency in place to be able to help us arrest this particular wave of cases, community spread of the COVID-19 pandemic, the virus. As a result, the government had put in place regulations 2 weeks ago under the emergency powers. And what has transpired yesterday is the cabinet has agreed to extend it for a further 2 weeks. And so a new set of regulations are being promulgated, published, gazetted today. They take effect from midnight tonight, and from midnight tonight, Sunday will be a day of limited operation. In other words, the Prime Minister made a speech and alerted the country last night that we are going to do this, and there's a 48-hour period for you to be able to plan and organize yourselves. From 6 p.m. tomorrow Sunday evening until Thursday morning, 5 a.m., there is a period of 24-hour curfew when you should remain at your home, you should shelter in place, except for special reason you may have to leave. And we say if you have a medical emergency and you have to go to the hospital, you can leave your home. If you have not vaccinated or need a second vaccination, between the hours of 8 and 1, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you may leave your home and go to the health center to be vaccinated. That is the first few days of this special regulation. Clearly, we have certain workers in the utilities, the breakdown of electricity, breakdown of water, the police and nurses, various essential workers. These would be exceptions, but we expect the majority of our citizens to shelter in place to arrest this virus. We'll have a limited operation on Thursday and Friday next week to allow us to be able to get any essential thing that we need. For a limited period, you go get it and go back home. If you have to go to the pharmacy, if you have to go to the doctor, We expect you to do that. And that will be Thursday and Friday. Again, on Saturday, Sunday, all the way up to Wednesday, after that, we expect that you would remain at home. A 24-hour curfew would be in place. And then the following Thursday and Friday, there'll be that release. And again, a further Saturday, Sunday restriction. This is necessary so that we can arrest the current spread of the virus. We expect our citizens to continue to be vaccinated, and that as more and more and more of us get vaccinated, it becomes less necessary for us to take harsh measures going into the future. Vaccinated people means that we will be able to live with the limited number, the much lower number of cases of COVID that may well come to St. Kitts and Nevis after we open back up. But it's important for us at this point in time to be able to try and arrest the movement of the virus by stricter measures.
I have a question based on learned behavior. As we've seen, the days of limited operation or responding to an outbreak by only enforcing a curfew or days of limited operation did not have the desired effect. Hence why we're here preparing for days of 24-hour lockdown. Hypothetically, after the 2 weeks have passed and maybe the numbers have subsided, if there is another outbreak, wouldn't it be prudent, in your opinion, I don't know how you're going to respond, but wouldn't it be prudent to base future decisions on learned behavior by realizing that starting with a limited curfew might not have the desired effect again, and instead going straight to the 24-hour lockdown?
Well, we hope we don't have to go to another 24-hour lockdown period, because the solution, we believe, is that as more and more people get vaccinated, the risk of the spread is reduced significantly. So that is the solution. And people are being vaccinated. Maybe not fast enough to our liking, but they are being vaccinated. Some of the numbers this week have been very encouraging. One day was 800 people going for second vax and that type of stuff. So we know that if we get to that point where we get a significant number of people vaccinated, we will have to seriously consider working through it, because the numbers of cases will be significantly lower, we believe. That means statistically fewer people getting seriously ill and going to the hospital, and God forbid, we reduce the potential for people to die. And we are very sorry about those that have passed away recently, but we are very concerned about that.
Understandably so. But if this all hinges on vaccination, there's one very real aspect towards vaccination: the number of doses we have left in stock, not to mention the expiration date, which is about to come up. And to my knowledge, we have not acquired any new doses to supplement these that are about to run out.
Well, I can't speak to that. I think that fundamentally is a matter that the Ministry of Health and the Prime Minister, I would hope that we have good news over the next few hours, because it's I know that we have been working very hard to get doses to supplement those, because we are doing so well in the vaccination program that it's possible that we can run out maybe even before Wednesday. We hope not, but I believe that there are backup situations in relation to where we can get those doses, additional doses, at this point in time. Okay? So we are hopeful. I'm hopeful. I am not in a position to make any announcement that we wouldn't be able to deal with the vaccination program. We know that we rely heavily on the populace being vaccinated. We know that we have done well, and we want to continue to get vaccinated. And so I believe that we will be in a position to vaccinate those who come forward.
Okay. Now, the nation's capacity or ability to vaccinate notwithstanding, again, my question is, do we have the vaccines to actually vaccinate? Just hear me out for a bit. As I mentioned, that the current batch is set to expire the end of June. So even if we have batches available, they left over, we'll be able to use them. I have not heard any word from the Ministry of Health as for the procurement of any other vaccines. I know they've been sourcing, and I've been in touch with various officials who said that yes, they're pursuing at least 3 different options, but to my knowledge, none of them is on island as yet. So, assuming that they take a week, 2 weeks to arrive, and if it goes beyond the upcoming lockdown and cases start spiking before we get these vaccines, my question goes again, wouldn't it be more prudent to put the more restrictive measures in place one time rather than going back to the days of limited operation?
Again, I can't speak to that. Like I say, there will come a time, we understand, that even if we have cases that are coming, that we would have been able to manage our community to the point where we can continue to function without having to go to this, what one of our colleagues speak about, the nuclear option. We understand that there are various social and psychological and economic fallout when we have a outbreak. So when we do this, we don't take any pleasure in doing it. We do it very reluctantly, but it is necessary to do so. But we expect our people, who we know are very resilient, to respond properly, and you spoke about learned behavior. If we continue to wear masks, if we wear masks, if we social distance, we sanitize, we too do our parts to reduce that potential for outbreak. And if it does happen, our learned behavior of wearing the mask will sort of slow down that spread and not get us to this position we have in. Okay?
I know that the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, and the Medical Chief of Staff, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, have been very vocal and they've been very present in the dissemination of information, but they are only human, and they have been at every public event giving this information. What are the thoughts to maybe switching out to other medical professionals to give them a break and probably allow for a different mode of expression?
I would say that the Ministry of Health has done an exceptionally good job in rolling out their vaccination program, and they have, the results show the effectiveness of what they've done. Because when we compare with other countries in our region and worldwide, on a per capita basis, we are out front in what we have done. I agree with you that both Dr. Laws and Dr. Wilkinson have done human service, and they're tired. We understand that. But they're public servants, and when you speak to them, they're not throwing in the towel. They are still out there batting, and they're batting good. And so we expect them to continue to do so. As to the strategies, as to other medical personnel have been involved, and they will be continue to be involved. I know that we see Dr. Laws and Dr. Wilson mainly, but others are involved, have been involved, and have been effective as well. And I'm sure that the Ministry of Health would have the various strategies in place to continue the work that they've done up to this point.
Okay. Here's a comment that we've got on our social media. I have no problem with the lockdown, but I don't like the late notice. I think people should have an early warning going forward. I would like to see early notice. This late notice is causing long lines, and that can contribute to the spread of COVID.
We understand that. I think the notice is 48 hours. If it was a week, I think we'd have the same sort of questions. But we believe that it was sufficient notice. We believe that it is something that we did. We were able yesterday, for instance, morning, even before we had cabinet and met and taken the final decision, to speak with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Christian Council Evangelical Association, the Contractors Association, hoteliers, people who are in charge of quarantine sites. So we have been interacting with people in civil society to let them know what the government was thinking about and likely to do ahead of time. Maybe we could have given more notice, but we believe that there was sufficient notice. And there's a natural human reaction to any notice of this nature. We believe it's something that we'll manage. We believe that the people themselves understand what it is that they need to do, that they need to space themselves out in lines. We have been seeing them at 4th Street, at the pharmacy, outside. There are places involved. And if it is that some people did not hear, I think we'd have to apologize to them, but the notices are there. And we expect that we'll get to this together.
Okay. Wrapping up on questions, let me, quick question. How would guests staying in the hotels be able to get shopping done on the lockdown days?
Guests in the hotels do shopping. Well, we have known for some time now that when guests come to the hotels, that they come there, and I take it you're talking about international guests, that they come there to vacation in place. Because when you come as a guest, you come to the hotel, you participate in the facilities of the hotel, you can walk around the hotel, and in some cases you could have used the beach of the hotel. And so, whether it was for the 9 days, if they're fully vaxxed, or 14 days then, whatever it was, there was an understanding that you participate in the facility in the hotel. And I'm not certain about them doing shopping outside. The restaurants are closed, and at this point there's no in-dining at restaurants around. But after 2 weeks, the cabinet, we will reconsider where we go forward, because we expect that having gotten a handle on this, that other considerations will be taken into place. An active consideration will be, if you're fully vaccinated, do you reduce the number of days to be in quarantine? Are there certain special considerations in relation to those who are vaccinated at the workplace and those type of things? But that will be determined after when we come out of this particular period.
Okay. Next question. What measures will be taken for persons with a license plate ending in 6 that have not been able to complete the licensing process because all of the mechanics that do the inspection have been closed?
I'm sure that the police will make the necessary adjustments. The traffic department will do so. And again too, the Commissioner of Police and the Transport Board will meet and determine what type of easement will be put in place for those. It's clearly a good point that you need to have a few extra days, maybe half a month, maybe to the end of July, I don't know. Well, but the announcement will be made subsequently. If
I may interject, if I remember, ZIZ News actually did a story covering comments from the traffic department stating that the inspection of vehicles ending in 6, license ending in 6, will be waived, considering that mechanics are closed and the actual inspection can't be done.
There you have it.
There you go.
Okay.
But I wanted to give you the chance to answer.
Yeah.
So we are almost out of time. I think that is it for all of the questions that have been sent in. I just want to make sure I did not miss any. Yeah, that seems it. We have covered it all, and I would like to thank you for coming in and shedding some light on many of these questions that persons have been raised. I think this announcement was much more focused and less detailed, and it left a lot less to be questioned. Yeah. So we got to a lot of the main points very quickly. Any final words before we say goodbye?
Yes, I would say that, you know, there are a number of our citizens who have been expecting this for weeks. As you mentioned, Some of them felt that this should have been done a couple of weeks ago, and they had begun preparing. As a question of notice, people have actually been going out and preparing for this particular day. And we would have liked that we did not have to come to it, that the measures that were put in place would have had the desired result and effect. There are those, a small minority, who still feel that we should maybe have not done what we have done, but it is the responsibility of the state to ensure that we protect all our citizens. And it is for us to ensure that we do whatever it takes, what is necessary, to bring this spread of this virus under control. We have determined that for the next 2 weeks, we want people to stay in place, to not move. We know it's an inconvenience, but it is for the benefit of all of us that we do this. And so I'd like to thank you for having me this morning, and hopefully that what we have done would have the desired effect, and we in St. Kitts and Nevis can return to a level of normalcy where people can live and love and have fun and work within the protocols that we have put, and be able to express themselves accordingly. So thank you again for having me. I just want to make one other intervention that has not come up, and the Prime Minister would have spoken about it last night, and that is the question of the state of emergency. And just to let our viewers know that we will be going to Parliament on Monday at 10 o'clock to be able to pass a resolution, debate and pass a resolution to extend the current state of emergency. This is necessary for us to be able to implement such things as curfews and give the police the authority to restrain people, arrest for breaches of the regulations where it may become necessary, because it's on the emergency powers regulations, the act, that you can do such things. The Governor General had proclaimed a state of emergency some 2 weeks ago, and this state of emergency expires after 21 days. He has that authority to do so. If it needs to be extended, we need to have the Parliament do so. The representatives will go to Parliament, debate it, the need for it, and explain to the public, to the community, why it's necessary to do so. And we believe that at this time, it's important to extend it, to give the security forces, the health professionals, the thought of legislative, legal basis for us to put the tools that we need to put in place, and so forth. That's why we go to Parliament on Monday for a sit-in.
I'm sure this question is on everyone's mind. For how long will it be extended?
Well, it could well go down, I think, to the end of the year. I had looked at some of the things. Some of our other neighbors have gone to Parliament more than once and extended more than once. But if we do it, it does not mean that if we go to the end of December, that we would have all of the restrictions, any restrictions in place, and we can end it at any time. If we get to the point that we find that there's no need for us to do that, it can well be revoked, and so we can get that sense that we are under less restrictions accordingly. But at this point in time, in the interest of our all of us, it is necessary for us to take that decision.
Okay, so just to wrap up, just because we're under a state of emergency does not mean that there would necessarily be restrictions in play.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, well, thank you very much once again for joining us here at ZIZ to shed some light on the additional restrictive measures announced by the Prime Minister. And to all of our viewers and listeners, you can stay tuned to ZIZ. We will be broadcasting the live NEOC COVID-19 briefing at 5 o'clock, where again you can pose more questions. AG, will you be at the briefing this afternoon?
Yes, I will be.
The AG will be at the briefing, and other health and national security officials will be there as well. So thank you once again for joining us. I'm Jason Davis for ZIZ TV.
Thanks.